On winter vacation, my daughter came from afar with her new boyfriend. I woke up in the middle of the night to noises in the backyard, and from the window I saw my son-in-law burying something with a flashlight. The next day, I waited for them to leave and I dug it up. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I'm Bruce, 61 years old, widower for 3 years now, and I thought I'd seen enough in life to not be surprised by anything anymore. I was wrong. It was the middle of December when Isabella called, my daughter, my only child, the person I love most in this world. Her voice sounded different on the phone, lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. "Dad, I'm coming home for the holidays, and I'm bringing someone, a boyfriend. The first one since that disaster of a marriage she escaped 5 years ago. I should have been happy. I wanted to be happy. But all I felt was that familiar tightness in my chest, that protective instinct that never quite goes away no matter how old your children get. I said yes, of course. Told her I couldn't wait to meet him. I even cleaned the guest room, which hadn't been used since Martha passed. 3 years, and I still couldn't bring myself to change anything in that room. The floral curtains she picked out, the quilt her mother made, even the book on the nightstand she never finished reading. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees, and there was snow piled up along the driveway. I watched from the living room window as Isabella got out of a blue Honda, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. She looked good, healthy. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a ponytail, and she was wearing that brown coat I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago. Then he stepped out. Paul. Tall, maybe 6 feet, dark hair, clean cut. He immediately went to the trunk and started pulling out their luggage, waving off Isabella when she tried to help. That should have been a good sign. Gentleman, I thought. Helpful. But something about the way he scanned the house, the yard, the street, made my stomach turn. Like he was assessing everything. Calculating. I shook it off, opened the door before they could knock. "Daddy," Isabella said, and suddenly she was in my arms, squeezing me the way she used to when she was little and I'd pick her up from school. She smelled like vanilla and winter air. "I missed you, kiddo. I missed you too." When we pulled apart, Paul was standing there with his hand extended. "Mr. Holloway, it's an honor to meet you. Isabella talks about you all the time." His handshake was firm, too firm maybe. Or maybe I was looking for problems that weren't there. His eyes were blue, clear, and when he smiled, it reached them. That should have made me feel better. "Call me Bruce," I said. "Come on in, both of you. You must be freezing." The first evening went smoothly enough. Isabella helped me heat up the lasagna I'd made earlier. She always loved my lasagna. And Paul set the table without being asked. We talked about safe things. The drive up, the weather, Isabella's new position at the marketing firm. Paul worked in IT consulting, he explained. Freelance, mostly. It gave him flexibility to work from anywhere. "That's actually how we met," Isabella added, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. He was consulting for our company. I spilled coffee all over his laptop on his first day. Paul laughed. Best coffee spill of my life. They looked at each other with that kind of tenderness that made my chest ache. It reminded me of Martha and me back in the beginning. Back when everything was simple and the future felt like something bright we were walking toward together. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I'd lit a fire in the fireplace, something Martha always insisted on during the holidays. The wood crackled and the orange glow filled the room with warmth. Paul sat close to Isabella on the couch, his arm draped over her shoulders. She leaned into him naturally, comfortably. "Your home is beautiful, Bruce," Paul said. "Isabella told me you built the deck yourself." "And the shed out back," Isabella chimed in, smiling at me. "Dad's always been good with his hands. He can fix anything." "Not everything," I muttered, thinking of all the things I couldn't fix, couldn't save. The conversation drifted. Paul asked about my years working construction, about the neighborhood, about Martha. That last one caught me off guard. Isabella must have told him, but hearing her name out loud from a stranger's mouth felt wrong. Invasive. "She was an incredible woman," I said quietly. This was her favorite time of year. Isabella's eyes got glassy. She reached for my hand. "I know, Dad. We said goodnight around 10. Isabella hugged me extra tight, whispered that she was happy, that Paul was good to her, that I'd see. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. The house felt different with people in it again. I kept hearing small sounds, footsteps, whispers, normal things, I told myself. Just a couple settling in. Then at 3:17 in the morning, I heard something else. A door closing. Not the front door, but the sliding glass door that leads to the back deck. I sat up, heart already pounding, waited, listened. Footsteps on the deck, slow, deliberate. I got out of bed, moved to the window. The motion sensor light in the yard hadn't come on, which meant whoever was out there was staying close to the house, in the shadows. I pressed my face close to the glass, trying to see. Then I saw him, Paul, standing in the middle of my backyard, wearing dark clothes, holding a flashlight in one hand and a shovel in the other. My blood went cold. He walked toward the far corner of the yard, near the old oak tree, and started digging. The shovel cut into the frozen ground with dull, heavy sounds. He worked quickly, efficiently, like he'd done this before. Every few seconds he'd glance back at the house. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Drugs, money, evidence, a body. No, that's insane. That's paranoid. But I watched him dig deeper, watched him pull something from his jacket, something wrapped in black plastic, something roughly the size of a shoebox. He placed it in the hole carefully, almost reverently. Then he covered it up, packed the dirt down, scattered some snow over the top. When he was done, he stood there for a moment, staring at the spot. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. I dove back into bed, pulled the covers up, squeezed my eyes shut, heard the sliding door open and close, heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard him pause outside my door. My heart hammered so hard, I thought he might hear it, but he moved on. A door opened and closed. Silence. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. What had I just seen? What was buried in my yard? And what kind of man was my daughter sleeping next to? By the time the sun came up, I hadn't slept at all. I went through the motions of making coffee, my hands shaking slightly. When Isabella and Paul came downstairs, I tried to act normal, smiled, asked how they slept. Great, Isabella said, pouring herself coffee. This house always makes me sleep like a baby. Paul stood by the window, looking out at the backyard. Morning light caught his profile. He looked calm, rested, like a man with nothing to hide. But I saw it, the dirt under his fingernails. "Everything okay, Bruce?" he asked, turning to me with that same easy smile. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. Fine, just didn't sleep well. Old age, you know? He nodded sympathetically. I understand. My father had trouble sleeping too as he got older. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't focus. I kept staring at him, searching for cracks, for signs. Isabella laughed at something he said, touched his arm affectionately. She looked happy. She looked safe. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew I had to find out what he buried in my yard. The question was, how long could I wait? How long could I pretend everything was fine while that thing, whatever it was, sat out there under the snow and frozen dirt? Paul caught me staring. He tilted his head slightly, questioningly. I looked away quickly, took a sip of coffee that had gone cold. "We should do something today," Isabella suggested. "Maybe drive into town? There's that Christmas market you used to take me to, Dad. Is it still there?" I forced myself to focus, to be present. Yeah, it's still there." "Perfect," Paul said, putting his arm around Isabella. "Sounds like a plan." But all I could think about was the shovel, the hole, the black plastic package, and the dirt still under his fingernails. I couldn't eat breakfast. The eggs Isabella made sat on my plate, getting cold while I pushed them around with my fork. Every time I looked at Paul, I saw him in the backyard at 3 in the morning, digging that hole with the kind of focus that comes from necessity, not choice. "You sure you're okay, Dad?" Isabella asked, her forehead creasing with concern. "You look pale." "Just tired, sweetheart. Didn't get much sleep." Paul leaned back in his chair, coffee mug in hand. "You know, Bruce, my grandfather used to have trouble sleeping. Started taking melatonin, helped him quite a bit. I could pick some up for you if you'd like." The casual kindness in his voice made my skin crawl. How could someone offer to help with sleep aids mere hours after burying God knows what in someone's backyard? That's all right, I managed. I'll be fine. After breakfast, they got ready to head into town. Isabella came downstairs wearing a green sweater, her cheeks flushed with happiness. She looked so much like Martha in that moment that my throat tightened. "We'll be back by dinner," she said, kissing my cheek. "You want us to pick anything up?" No. You two have fun." Paul appeared behind her, now wearing different clothes. Clean clothes, no trace of dirt anywhere. He'd showered, I realized, washed away the evidence. "You're sure you don't want to come with us, Bruce? The Christmas market is really charming," Isabella says. I shook my head. "You kids go ahead. I've got some things to do around here anyway." Isabella gave me one more hug, and then they were gone. I watched through the window as Paul opened the car door for her, waited until she was settled before closing it. Such a gentleman. Such perfect manners. The moment their car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my coat. My hands were shaking as I opened the shed to get a shovel. The same shed I built 23 years ago, back when Isabella was just a baby and Martha was pregnant with the second child we'd lose 3 months later. I'd built so many things with these hands, fixed so many things, but I'd never imagined using them for this. The yard was quiet except for the sound of my breathing. I walked to the oak tree, to the spot where I'd seen Paul dig. The snow had been disturbed. I could see that now in the daylight. Scattered in a way that was meant to look natural, but wasn't quite right. I started digging. The ground was harder than I expected, frozen from the overnight cold. Every thrust of the shovel sent vibrations up my arms, made my shoulders ache. I'm 61, not as strong as I used to be, and my body reminded me of that with every movement. "What are you doing, Bruce?" I asked myself. What if it's nothing? What if you're just a paranoid old man who can't stand to see his daughter happy? But I kept digging. 20 minutes passed. 30. My back screamed at me to stop. Sweat dripped down my face despite the cold. And then the shovel hit something that wasn't dirt. My heart stopped. I dropped to my knees, started clawing at the earth with my hands. The black plastic appeared just like I'd seen last night. I pulled it free, my fingers numb from cold and fear. It was heavier than I expected. Dense. Solid. I sat back on my heels holding it. This was it. This was the moment. Whatever was inside, this package would tell me who Paul really was. Would tell me if my daughter was safe, or if I needed to call the police right now. My phone was in my pocket. I could call Chief Morrison. We'd been friends for 30 years. He'd come over, no questions asked. We could open this together, handle it properly. But what if I was wrong? What if it was something innocent and I destroyed Isabella's happiness over nothing? She'd been through so much with her ex-husband. The divorce had nearly broken her. It took her 5 years to trust someone again. 5 years to smile the way she'd smiled at breakfast. Could I risk taking that from her? I started unwrapping the plastic. My fingers fumbled with the tape, with the multiple layers. Paul had wrapped this thoroughly, hidden it well. The final layer came free. Inside was a metal box, old, weathered, with rust spots on the corners, no lock, just a simple latch. I opened it, papers, photographs, documents of some kind. I pulled out the first photograph, a black and white image of a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing in front of a building. He looked thin, sad. His clothes were too big for him. I flipped it over. Written on the back in faded ink, Paul Hendricks, age 8, St. Mary's Home for Children. My stomach dropped. An orphanage. Paul had been in an orphanage. I grabbed more papers, birth certificate, Paul Michael Hendricks, born October 19, 1989, mother unknown, father unknown, foster care records, pages and pages of them, different families, different homes, notes from social workers, behavioral issues, trust problems, difficulty forming attachments. I sat there in the dirt, surrounded by the evidence of a childhood I couldn't imagine. A little boy passed from home to home, never belonging anywhere, never having anyone. Then I found the letters. They were addressed to various people, adoptive families who'd given him up, foster parents who'd sent him away, teachers who'd written him off. Some were sealed, never sent. Others were torn, like he'd started to mail them and changed his mind. I opened one dated 15 years ago. Dear Mrs. Patterson, I know you probably don't remember me. I was only with your family for 7 months when I was 9. You said I was too difficult, too damaged, that you couldn't fix me. I just wanted you to know that I turned out okay. I got my degree. I have a job. I'm not damaged. I never was. I was just a kid who needed someone to stay. The letter was unsigned, unsent. My chest felt tight. I grabbed another photo, this one more recent, maybe a year or 2 old. Paul standing in front of a building I recognized, St. Mary's Home for Children, the same one from the childhood photo. But in this picture, the building was abandoned, windows broken, walls covered in graffiti, and there was something written on the back of this photo too. Time to bury the past, time to move forward, time to build something real. I heard it then. The sound of a car in the driveway. My head snapped up. They were back already. It hadn't even been 2 hours. I looked down at the mess around me. The hole, the paper scattered in the dirt, the box, the evidence of my betrayal lying there in the snow. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I tried to shove everything back in the box, but my hands were shaking too badly. The car doors slammed. Footsteps on the gravel driveway. "Dad!" Isabella's voice called out. "Dad, where are you?" I grabbed the papers, tried to stuff them back into the box, but some slipped from my frozen fingers, scattered across the ground. The gate to the backyard creaked open. "Bruce?" Paul's voice now. "Is everything okay?" I finally managed to stand, turning to face them. Isabella came around the corner first, her expression confused. Then she saw me, saw the shovel, saw the hole, saw the box in my hands. Her face went white. Paul appeared behind her. For a moment we just stared at each other. Me holding the evidence of his past. Him seeing his secrets exposed in the winter sun. "What?" Isabella's voice broke. "What is this?" Paul's jaw tightened. His hands clenched at his sides. But his eyes, when they met mine, weren't angry. They were filled with something else. Shame. Pure, devastating shame. Isabella looked between us, her breath coming faster. "Dad, what did you do?" I tried to speak, but no words came out. How could I explain? How could I justify what I'd done? Paul took a step forward. His voice was quiet, measured, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "You dug it up." It wasn't a question. I started, but my throat closed up. Isabella's eyes were filling with tears. "You were spying on us? You were digging through Paul's things?" "Not spying," I finally managed. "Last night I saw him, at 3 in the morning, burying something. I had to know. I had to make sure you were safe." "Safe?" Isabella's voice rose, sharp and hurt. "Safe from what, Dad?" Paul hadn't moved. He was staring at the scattered papers, at his own childhood face looking up from the dirt. A muscle worked in his jaw. "From him?" I said weakly, knowing how it sounded, knowing how wrong I'd been. Isabella laughed, but it was bitter, broken. "You thought what exactly? That Paul was dangerous? That he was hiding something sinister?" I couldn't answer. Paul finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Those were private, Bruce. Those were mine." The weight of what I'd done crashed over me. This wasn't evidence of a crime. This was a man's pain, his history, the things he wanted to leave behind. Isabella stepped toward the papers, bent down to pick them up. Her hands were gentle as she gathered them, as if they might shatter. When she stood, tears were streaming down her face. She looked at Paul, and something passed between them, some understanding I wasn't part of. Then she turned to me, and I saw it. The disappointment, the hurt, the realization that her own father had trusted a stranger's late-night actions more than he'd trusted her judgment. "I think," her voice cracked, "I think you should go inside, Dad." "Isabella, please just go inside." I stood there, shovel in hand, watching as my daughter comforted the man I'd violated, watching as she collected the pieces of a past I had no right to uncover, watching as the distance between us grew wider than any hole I could dig. I turned and walked toward the house, my legs heavy, my heart heavier. Behind me, I heard Isabella's voice, soft and soothing, talking to Paul. Heard him respond, his voice thick with emotion. I'd been so sure I was protecting her, so certain that I was being the father she needed. But as I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, I realized the truth. I hadn't been protecting Isabella. I'd been protecting myself from change, from loss, from the terrifying reality that my daughter didn't need me anymore the way she once did. And in trying to protect her, I might have just destroyed everything. I sat at the kitchen table for what felt like hours. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time I couldn't get back. Through the window, I could see them still outside. Isabella had her arms around Paul, his head bowed, her hand rubbing circles on his back the way Martha used to do for me when the world felt too heavy. The coffee I'd poured had gone cold. I didn't drink it, just wrapped my hands around the mug because I needed something to hold on to. The sound of the sliding glass door opening made me flinch. Isabella came in first, her eyes red and swollen. Paul followed, carrying the metal box. He'd rewrapped it in the black plastic, but I could see his hands trembling slightly as he held it. Neither of them looked at me. "I'm going to pack our things," Isabella said, her voice flat. "We'll leave in the morning." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Izzy, please." She held up her hand, stopping me. Just don't right now, Dad." They moved toward the stairs. Paul's footsteps were heavy, defeated. I'd done that. I'd taken whatever piece he'd found and shattered it. "Wait," I said, standing up. My chair scraped against the floor. "Please, let me explain." Isabella turned, and the look on her face nearly broke me. "There's nothing to explain. You saw Paul do something you didn't understand, and instead of trusting me, you violated his privacy. You dug up his past like it was yours to uncover. I was trying to protect you." "From what?" She threw her hands up. "From a man who's been nothing but kind? From someone who actually treats me with respect? Or were you protecting yourself, Dad? From the possibility that I might actually be happy with someone? That's not fair, isn't it?" Her voice cracked. "I brought Paul here because I wanted you to see what I see. I wanted you to know the man I love, but you couldn't even give him a chance. Love. She loved him, and I'd poisoned that." Paul spoke for the first time since coming inside. "Isabella, it's okay." "No," she said firmly, turning to him. "It's not okay. You trusted me with your story. You showed me those papers because you wanted me to understand where you came from. And now," she couldn't finish, just shook her head and started up the stairs. Paul stood there for a moment longer, the box still in his hands. He looked at me, and I saw exhaustion in his eyes, not anger, just pure, bone-deep tiredness. "I should have asked," I said. "I should have trusted her judgment." He nodded slowly. "Yes, you should have." Then he followed Isabella upstairs, and I was alone again. I didn't sleep that night either. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Isabella's face, the disappointment, the hurt. I'd survived Martha's death, barely, but the thought of losing Isabella, of her walking out that door and never coming back, that felt like something I wouldn't survive. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Then a soft knock on my door. "Dad, it's me." I sat up quickly. "Come in." Isabella opened the door. She was wearing Martha's old robe, the blue one that used to hang in our closet. Seeing her in it made my chest ache. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "No." She came in and sat on the edge of my bed, the way she used to when she was little, and had a nightmare. We sat in silence for a while, the darkness around us heavy with everything unsaid. "He told me everything," she finally said, "about why he buried those papers, about what they meant to him." I waited, giving her space to continue. "That building in the photo, St. Mary's, it's about 15 miles from here. Paul grew up there, spent most of his childhood in the system. He was never adopted. No one wanted him long enough to make it permanent." My throat tightened. 3 months ago, he found out the orphanage was being demolished, torn down to build condos. He went there one last time, took those papers, those photos, all the records of a childhood he wanted to forget. She paused, wiping her eyes. He was going to throw them away. But then he met me, and I told him about Mom, about how she always said our past shapes us, but doesn't have to define us. I remembered Martha saying that. She'd say it whenever I got stuck in old patterns, old fears. "He decided to bury them instead," Isabella continued. "Said it was symbolic, putting the past to rest in the ground, leaving it behind so he could move forward. He chose your backyard because this house, this family, it represents the future he wants to build." The weight of what I'd done pressed down on me. I didn't know. That's the point, Dad? You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't trust me enough to believe I could make a good choice about who to love. She was right. I'd been so consumed by fear, by the need to protect her, that I'd become the very thing she needed protection from. Your mother would be disappointed in me, I whispered. Isabella's hand found mine in the dark. Yeah, you probably would be. We sat there for a long moment. Then she spoke again, softer this time. You know what hurts the most? It's not even that you dug up his past. It's that you looked at me, at how happy I was, and you still couldn't trust it. You couldn't trust that maybe, just maybe, I found someone good. I squeezed her hand, feeling tears burn behind my eyes. I'm sorry, Izzy. I'm so sorry. I know, but Paul's the one who deserves the apology. She stood up, moved toward the door. Then she paused, looked back at me. He's not going to press this, Dad. He's not angry. He's just hurt. And he's embarrassed that you saw all of that, all his pain laid out like evidence of something wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with him, I said quickly. Then you need to tell him that. She left, and I was alone with the truth. I judged a man for having a painful past, for wanting to leave it behind, for trying to heal in the only way he knew how. And I'd done it all in the name of protection, when really I was just afraid. Afraid of losing Isabella, afraid of being alone, afraid that if she didn't need me anymore, I'd have no purpose left. The next morning, I found Paul on the back deck. He was staring at the oak tree, at the spot where he'd buried his past and where I'd dug it up. He had a cup of coffee in his hands, steam rising in the cold morning air. I stepped outside, and he glanced at me but didn't say anything. I stood beside him, looking at the same spot. I filled in the hole, I said. Put everything back the way it was. Thank you. Silence stretched between us. A cardinal landed on the oak tree branch, bright red against the white snow. My wife Martha, she was married before me, to a man who hurt her. Not physically, but in other ways. Made her feel small, made her doubt herself. When I met her, she was still carrying all of that, still trying to figure out if she was worthy of being loved. Paul turned to look at me. It took her years to trust me, years to believe that I wouldn't leave, that I wouldn't hurt her the way he did. And you know what I did? I was patient. I showed up. I proved through actions, not words, that I was safe. I paused, swallowing hard. But last night I became the thing she was afraid of. I became suspicious, invasive. I violated trust because I thought I knew better. He started to speak, but I held up my hand. I need to say this. When I saw you out here, burying something, I didn't see a man trying to heal. I saw a threat. And that says everything about me and nothing about you. I should have trusted Isabella. I should have trusted you. And I'm sorry. Paul set his coffee down on the deck railing. Bruce, I understand why you were concerned. From the outside, what I did looked suspicious. That doesn't make it right. He nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. But I also understand protecting the people you love. I never had anyone do that for me growing up. No one cared enough to worry. So in a strange way, even though what you did hurt, I understand it. That's generous of you. He shrugged. Isabella told me about your wife, about how much you loved her, how much you miss her. I can't imagine what it's like to lose someone like that and then watch your daughter bring home a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore, I said. And you're not what I thought you were. You're just someone who survived something hard and came out the other side still able to love. That's not suspicious. That's remarkable. Paul's eyes got glassy. He looked away, out at the yard. Thank you. That means more than you know. We stood there for a while longer, two men who'd both been shaped by loss, learning how to exist in the same space. Finally, Paul spoke again. I'm not taking her away from you, Bruce. I know that's probably what you're afraid of, but I'm not here to replace you or push you out. I just want to be part of her life, part of both your lives, if you'll let me. I looked at him then, really looked at him, saw past my fear, saw the man my daughter loved, the man who buried his pain in my backyard because he wanted to build something new. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Isabella appeared at the sliding door watching us. Her face was cautious, hopeful. I nodded at her, and she smiled. Not the big, easy smile from when they'd arrived, but a smaller one. A start. She stepped outside, moved between us, took both our hands. "So," she said, her voice tentative, "are we okay?" Paul and I looked at each other. We weren't there yet. Not completely. But we were on our way. "We'll get there," I said. And for the first time since that night by the oak tree, I felt like maybe I could breathe again. They didn't leave that morning. Isabella came downstairs with their bags, but Paul stopped her at the door, said they should stay, said he wanted to try to make this work. I'll admit, I was grateful. Not just because I didn't want them to leave, but because it gave me a chance to show them who I really was, who I wanted to be. We spent that day carefully, quietly, like people walking on ice that might crack at any moment. I made lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches, because that's what Isabella loved as a kid, and we sat around the kitchen table. The conversation was stilted at first. Weather, traffic, safe things. But then Paul asked about the photos on the mantel, and I found myself talking about Martha. "That one," I said, pointing to a picture of her laughing on a beach. That was our 10th anniversary. We went to Cape Cod. We'd never seen the ocean before, can you believe that? 38 years old and never saw the ocean. Isabella smiled. She told me about that trip, said it was one of the best weeks of her life. She collected shells like a kid, I continued, feeling the familiar ache in my chest, filled an entire suitcase with them. I told her we'd have to pay overweight fees, and she said she didn't care, said every shell had a story. Paul leaned forward slightly. "Do you still have them?" "The shells?" I nodded. "In the garage. In boxes." I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Isabella's eyes got soft. "I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, kiddo. A lot I haven't been able to talk about." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. After lunch, Paul asked if he could help with anything around the house. Said he noticed the gutter on the north side was loose. I almost said no, almost told him not to worry about it. But then I caught myself. "That'd be great," I said instead. "Tools are in the shed." We worked together in the cold afternoon air, him holding the ladder steady while I reattached the gutter. It felt strange at first, working alongside him, but there was something calming about it. The physical labor, the shared purpose. "You're good at this," he said as I climbed down. "Been doing it for 40 years. You learn a thing or two." He smiled, but it was tentative. "Would you teach me?" I never learned much about home repair. Foster homes don't exactly encourage you to fix things. It was the first time he'd mentioned his past directly to me. I could have let it pass, moved on to safer ground. But I didn't. "I'd like that," I said. "Teaching you." His expression shifted. Surprised? Grateful. We put the tools away, and as we walked back to the house, Paul stopped. "Bruce, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That night, when you saw me burying the box, what did you think it was?" "Honestly." I hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. I thought it might be drugs, or money, or something that would hurt Isabella. "I thought you might be dangerous." He nodded slowly, processing that. "And now?" "Now I think you're just someone trying to leave pain behind, someone who's been hurt and doesn't want to carry it anymore." He looked at me for a long moment. "That's exactly what I am." Inside, Isabella was making hot chocolate. The smell of it filled the kitchen, sweet and familiar. She handed us each a mug, and we sat in the living room by the fire. Paul sat close to Isabella on the couch, and I noticed the way she leaned into him, natural, comfortable, safe. "Isabella," I said, setting down my mug, "can I tell you something?" She looked up, cautious. "Of course. When your mother died, I thought I died too, not physically, but inside, where it matters. I went through the motions, kept living because that's what you do, but I wasn't really here." "Dad," she started, but I shook my head. "Let me finish. These past 3 years, I've been holding on so tight to what I had with your mother that I couldn't see what was right in front of me, couldn't see that you were building a life, that you were healing from your own pain, that you were finding happiness." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "And when you brought Paul home, when I saw you happy with him, I got scared. Because if you were okay, if you didn't need me anymore, then what was I? What was my purpose?" Isabella stood up, came over to me, sat on the arm of my chair like she used to when she was little. "Dad, I'll always need you, just in different ways now. I know that now, I do. But that night, when I saw Paul out there, all I could see was someone taking you away from me. I couldn't see that he was just trying to heal, trying to move forward. Paul spoke up, his voice quiet. Bruce, I want you to know something. Isabella talks about you all the time, about the things you taught her, about how you showed up for her when her ex-husband was tearing her down. You're her hero. The word hit me hard. Hero? I didn't feel like anyone's hero, not after what I'd done. I've made mistakes, I said. Big ones. Isabella rested her head on my shoulder. We all have. But what matters is what we do after. We sat there for a while, the three of us, and something shifted. The tension that had been strangling us started to ease. Not completely, but enough that I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning. That evening, Isabella suggested we drive into town for dinner. There's that Italian place you and Mom used to go to, she said. Is it still open? Antonio's. Yeah, it's still there. We went. The restaurant looked exactly the same. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, pictures of Italy on the walls. Antonio himself came out, older now, grayer, but still with that booming voice. Bruce! Madonna? How long has it been? Too long, Antonio. He looked at Isabella, at Paul, and his eyes got misty. You're Martha. She loved this place. Best customer we ever had. She loved your lasagna, I said, smiling despite the ache in my chest. We sat in a corner booth, the same one Martha and I used to request. The memories were thick here, but for the first time, they didn't suffocate me. They just were. Part of the past. Part of the story. Isabella ordered the lasagna, said she wanted to taste what Mom loved so much. Paul got spaghetti carbonara, and I got the chicken parmesan. We shared garlic bread and told stories. Paul talked about his work, about a project he was consulting on that was going sideways. Isabella laughed, said that was every project he worked on. He pretended to be offended, and she kissed his cheek. I watched them, really watched them, and for the first time, I didn't see a threat. I saw two people who'd found each other, who were building something real. After dinner, as we walked to the car, Isabella pulled me aside. Paul had gone ahead to start the engine, warm it up. Thank you, she said. For what? For trying. I know this is hard for you. I know you're still grieving, Mom, but you're trying, and that matters. I put my arm around her, pulled her close. You deserve to be happy, Izzy, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that Paul makes you happy. He does, Dad, he really does. Then that's all that matters. She hugged me tight, and I held on, breathing in the moment. My daughter. My incredible, strong, beautiful daughter who'd survived her own pain and found love on the other side. That night, back at the house, Paul came to my room. He knocked softly, waited for me to invite him in. Bruce, I have something for you. He handed me an envelope. I opened it, confused. Inside was a piece of paper with an address written on it. What's this? Paul sat down in the chair by my bed. It's the address of the therapist I've been seeing for the past 2 years. She specializes in grief and trauma. He paused. I think she could help you. I stared at the paper. Part of me wanted to be defensive, to say I didn't need help, but the truth was, I did. I'd been drowning for 3 years, just refusing to admit it. I'll think about it, I said. Paul nodded. That's all I ask. He stood up, moved toward the door, then turned back. Bruce, I'm not trying to replace your wife. No one could. But I do love your daughter, and I want to be someone you can trust. You already are. He smiled, a real one this time, and left. I sat there holding the address, thinking about everything that had happened, about how close I'd come to destroying something precious, about how fear can make you do things you never thought you were capable of. But I also thought about second chances, about how sometimes we bury things not because we want to hide them, but because we want to leave them behind, want to make space for something new. I looked at the address again, then carefully folded the paper and put it in my wallet. Tomorrow. I'd call tomorrow. Through the wall, I could hear Isabella and Paul talking softly, then laughing about something. The sound of her happiness, genuine and unguarded, was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in 3 years. Maybe, I thought, maybe this was what moving forward looked like. Not forgetting Martha, not replacing her, just making room for new people, new love, new possibilities. I turned off the light and for the first time in days, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning I woke up to the smell of coffee and something else, pancakes. I came downstairs to find Paul at the stove, flipping them with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Morning, Bruce. Hope you don't mind. Isabella said you liked pancakes on Saturdays." I stood there for a moment, taking it in. A man in my kitchen, making breakfast, using Martha's spatula, her favorite mixing bowl. It should have bothered me, should have felt like an intrusion, but it didn't. "That's Martha's recipe," I said, recognizing the smell. "Buttermilk and vanilla." Paul nodded. "Isabella taught me, said her mom made the best pancakes in the world." She did. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table, watched him work. He moved carefully around the kitchen, respectful of the space, not trying to take over, just trying to help. Isabella came down a few minutes later, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She stopped when she saw us, a smile spreading across her face. "Look at this. My two favorite men in the same room, and no one's fighting." "We're not fighting," I said. "We're having pancakes." She laughed, kissed Paul on the cheek, then came over and kissed the top of my head. "This is nice." And it was. The three of us sitting around that table, eating pancakes, talking about nothing important, the kind of morning I hadn't had since Martha died, the kind I didn't think I'd have again. After breakfast, Isabella suggested we go for a walk. "There's a trail near here I used to love," she said. "Can we go? All three of us?" The trail wound through the woods behind the neighborhood, covered in snow, but still passable. We walked slowly, Isabella between Paul and me, her arm linked through mine. "Remember when you used to bring me here, Dad? When I was little?" "Yeah. You'd collect pine cones, fill your pockets until they were falling out." She laughed. "Mom would get so mad when I'd forget them in my coat, and they'd end up in the washing machine." Paul smiled at that, but I noticed something in his expression. A distance, like he was watching something he couldn't quite be part of. "What about you, Paul?" I asked. "Did you have any places like this growing up?" He was quiet for a moment, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Not really. We moved around a lot. Different foster homes, different neighborhoods. Never stayed anywhere long enough to have a place that was mine." Isabella squeezed his hand. "You have places now?" He looked at her, and the love in his eyes was so clear it almost hurt to see. "Yeah, I do." We walked a bit further, and then Paul stopped. "There's something I want to ask you both, something I've been thinking about." We turned to face him. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Isabella, I know we've only been together for 8 months. And Bruce, I know we just met." But he took a deep breath. "I love your daughter more than I've ever loved anyone. And I want to build a life with her, a real one." Isabella's eyes went wide. "Paul, are you—" He held up his hand. "I'm not proposing. Not yet. Not without talking to your dad first." He looked at me. "Bruce, I know I'm not what you imagined for Isabella. I don't have a fancy family or a history you can check. All I have is a past I'm trying to leave behind and a future I want to build with her. And I'm asking for your blessing." The words hung in the cold air between us. Isabella was staring at me, her eyes pleading, hopeful, scared. A week ago, I would have said no, would have found a reason, any reason, to protect her from this. But standing there, seeing the way Paul looked at her, the way she looked at him, I realized something. This wasn't about me. It never was. "Paul," I said slowly, "I'm going to be honest with you. When you first got here, I didn't trust you. I looked for problems because I was afraid of losing my daughter." "I know," he said quietly. "But these past few days I've seen who you really are. I've seen how you treat Isabella, how you look at her, and more than that, I've seen how happy she is with you." He waited, barely breathing. "You don't need my blessing to love her. You already have that. But if you're asking if I support you two building a life together, then yes, you have my blessing." Isabella let out a sob, threw her arms around me. Paul's eyes got glassy, and he looked away, trying to compose himself. "Thank you," he managed. "That means everything." Isabella pulled back, wiped her eyes, then grabbed Paul's hand. She looked at both of us, and the joy on her face was something I'd remember for the rest of my life. We walked back to the house together, and something felt different, lighter, like we'd crossed some invisible line and there was no going back, only forward. That afternoon, Paul asked if he could talk to me alone. We went out to the garage where I kept my workshop. I hadn't been in there much since Martha died. Too many unfinished projects, too many reminders of the things I'd planned to do but never got around to. Paul looked around at the tools, the half-built birdhouse on the workbench, the sawdust on the floor. "You built all this?" he asked. "Most of it. The workbench, the shelves, that cabinet over there. It's impressive." I shrugged. "Just kept me busy, gave me something to do with my hands." He ran his fingers over the workbench, the wood smooth from years of use. "Bruce, I need to tell you something about the box I buried. You don't owe me an explanation." "No, but I want to give you one." He took a deep breath. Those papers, those photos, they weren't just memories. They were evidence of every time I wasn't enough, every time someone gave up on me. I kept them because I thought if I held on to them, if I remembered, I wouldn't make the same mistakes. He paused, picking up a piece of sandpaper, turning it over in his hands. But they were destroying me. Every time I looked at them, I saw that scared little boy who thought he was unlovable, and I couldn't move forward while carrying all of that. So I decided to bury them, put them in the ground like you would a body, a funeral for a past I didn't want to define me anymore. I understood that more than he knew. After Martha died, I'd kept everything. Her clothes, her books, her half-empty bottle of perfume. Couldn't let go because letting go felt like forgetting. "You chose my yard," I said. "Why?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw how young he really was. 27, still figuring out who he was and who he wanted to be. Because this house represents everything I never had. A home, a family, stability. I wanted to bury my past where my future was going to be. The weight of that statement settled between us. "Isabella doesn't know this part," he continued, "about why I chose here specifically. I didn't want her to think I was using her to fill some void." "You're not, are you?" "No." He said it firmly, without hesitation. "I love her for who she is, not what she represents. But I won't lie and say that being part of a real family isn't something I've always wanted." I picked up a small wooden box from the workbench, something I'd been working on before Martha got sick. It was supposed to be a jewelry box for her birthday. I never finished it. My wife used to say that we're all carrying something, some weight we don't talk about. And the people we love, they help us carry it. Not take it away, not fix it, but just help us bear the weight. Paul nodded slowly. "I think you've been carrying your past alone for too long," I said. "And I think Isabella wants to help you carry it, just like you help her carry hers." "She told you," he said quietly, "about her ex-husband." "Some. Enough to know she went through her own hell." We stood there in the garage, surrounded by tools and wood and the smell of sawdust, and something passed between us, an understanding, a recognition that we were both just men trying to do right by someone we loved. "Paul," I said, "I don't know much about you yet, but I know you're not running from something. You're running toward something, and that makes all the difference." He smiled, a real one, and extended his hand. "Thank you, Bruce, for giving me a chance." I shook his hand, firm and sure. "Welcome to the family." That night after dinner, the three of us sat in the living room. Isabella had found old photo albums and was showing Paul pictures of her childhood. Martha and me on our wedding day, Isabella as a baby, family vacations, Christmases. Paul looked at each photo carefully, like he was studying them, memorizing them. "This one," Isabella said, pointing to a picture of her and Martha baking cookies. "This was the last Christmas before Mom got sick. We made 7 different kinds of cookies, ate half of them before Dad even got home from work. Your mother was a terrible influence," I said, smiling at the memory. "No self-control when it came to sweets." Isabella laughed. "I get it from her." Paul was quiet, just watching us. And then he said something that surprised me. "I envy this. Not in a bitter way. Just, I never had memories like this. Never had someone to bake cookies with or take photos with. But being here, hearing these stories, it makes me hopeful." "Hopeful?" Isabella asked. "That I can create these memories with you, with our kids someday. That I can give them what I never had." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "You will, we will, And sitting there, watching them plan a future together, I realized something. I wasn't losing a daughter. I was gaining a son, someone who would love her, protect her, build a life with her. Someone who understood what it meant to lose and to find. Paul looked at me then, and I nodded. A silent acknowledgement of what we both knew. That family wasn't about blood or history. It was about choice, about showing up, about staying. And he was staying. Their last morning came too quickly. Isabella packed their bags while Paul helped me fix the loose board on the back deck. We worked in comfortable silence now, the kind that comes when words aren't necessary. "You'll come visit us, right?" Paul asked, hammering in a nail. "In the spring?" "I'd like that." He set down the hammer, turned to face me. "Bruce, I want you to know something. What happened here, what you did, digging up my past, it doesn't define you. Just like my past doesn't define me. We both made mistakes, but we both chose to move forward." I nodded, feeling the tightness in my chest ease. "You're a good man, Paul, better than I gave you credit for." He smiled. "I'm trying to be." Isabella came outside, her coat already on. She looked at the two of us, and something in her expression softened. "You ready?" Paul picked up the toolbox. "Yeah, let's get these inside first." They loaded up the car while I made one last pot of coffee. Isabella came back in, found me standing at the kitchen window watching the snow fall. "Dad," she said softly, coming to stand beside me, "are you going to be okay?" "Yeah, kiddo, I am." She didn't look convinced. "I worry about you. All alone in this big house." "I'm not alone," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I've got memories, good ones, and now I've got something to look forward to. You two visiting, maybe grandkids someday." Her eyes went wide. "Grandkids? We're not even engaged yet." "Yet," I said, smiling. She laughed, hugged me tight. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, Izzy. More than you know." Paul came back in, stopped when he saw us. His expression was tender, understanding. He knew what this was. A father letting go, a daughter stepping forward, the natural order of things, painful and beautiful all at once. "We should hit the road," he said gently. "Beat the traffic." Isabella pulled back, wiped her eyes. "1 second, I need to get something." She ran upstairs, and Paul and I stood there in the kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd confronted him, where I'd accused him without words, where everything had nearly fallen apart. "Thank you," I said, "for not giving up on us, on me." "You're her father," Paul said simply. "That means you're important to me too." Isabella came back down holding something wrapped in tissue paper. She handed it to me. "Open it after we leave, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We walked them out to the car. The cold bit at my face, but I barely noticed. Paul loaded the last bag, closed the trunk. Isabella hugged me one more time, long and tight. "Call me when you get home," I said. "I will." "And Dad?" She pulled back, looked at me seriously. "Make that appointment with the therapist. Please, I will." She searched my face, making sure I meant it. Then she nodded, satisfied. Paul shook my hand, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief hug. "Take care of yourself, Bruce." "You too, son." The words slipped out naturally. "Son." Paul's eyes got bright, and he nodded quickly, turning away before I could see if he was crying. They got in the car. I stood on the driveway, hands in my pockets, watching as they backed out. Isabella waved from the passenger window, and I raised my hand. Watched until the car disappeared around the corner. Watched until I couldn't see it anymore. The house felt empty when I went back inside, but it was a different kind of empty than before. Not hollow, just quiet. I sat down at the kitchen table and carefully unwrapped the tissue paper. Inside was a photo in a simple wooden frame. It was from just a few days ago, the three of us on that walk in the woods. Paul must have taken it, setting the camera on timer. We were all smiling, all together. And beneath the photo, Isabella had written something. "Family isn't just who we're born to, it's who we choose, who chooses us back." I traced the words with my finger, feeling the weight of them settle into my bones. That afternoon, I called the therapist, the one Paul had recommended. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and her voice was kind when she answered. "I'd like to make an appointment," I said. My daughter's boyfriend suggested I call." She didn't ask questions, just offered me a time the following Tuesday. I took it. After I hung up, I went out to the garage. To the workshop I'd been avoiding, I picked up the unfinished jewelry box, the one I'd been making for Martha. Ran my hand over the smooth wood. For 3 years, I'd left it there, unfinished, a monument to everything I'd lost. But looking at it now, I saw something else, not an ending. A pause. I picked up the sandpaper and got to work. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a new rhythm. Tuesday sessions with Dr. Chen, where I talked about Martha, about grief, about fear. It was hard. Some days I left her office feeling raw, exposed, but I kept going. I finished the jewelry box. It took me 2 weeks, working a little bit each day. When it was done, I put Martha's wedding ring inside, not to bury it, not to forget, just to give it a place, a home. Isabella called every few days, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to check in, and slowly, carefully, Paul started calling too. At first, just to ask about fixing things in their apartment, technical questions about plumbing and wiring. But then the calls got longer. We'd talk about work, about Isabella, about life. In February, they came to visit again. This time, there was no tension, no suspicion. Just 3 people who'd found a way to be a family. Paul helped me reorganize the garage. We worked side by side, and he told me about his childhood, really told me, the group homes, the foster families who'd sent him back, the loneliness that had followed him like a shadow. I listened, didn't try to fix it, didn't offer platitudes, just listened. And in return, I told him about Martha, about the day she died, about how I'd held her hand and felt the moment she left, about how I'd been angry at her for leaving me behind. We both cried. 2 grown men in a garage, crying over the things we'd lost and the things we'd found. In March, Paul called me. "Dad," he said, and the word made my breath catch. "Can I call you Dad?" "Yeah," I managed. "Yeah, you can." "Dad, I'm going to ask Isabella to marry me. I wanted to tell you first." My eyes burned. "When?" "Next weekend. I'm taking her to that trail. The one where we all walked. I'm going to bury something else there, a box with a note about our future, and then I'm going to ask her." I smiled through the tears. "She's going to say yes." "I hope so," he said, and I could hear the nervousness in his voice. "God, I hope so. She will." And she did. Isabella called me crying, laughing, barely able to speak. He asked me, "Dad?" He asked me, and I said yes. "Congratulations, sweetheart. You'll walk me down the aisle, right? Please say you will." Nothing could stop me. That night, I went out to the backyard, to the oak tree, the spot where Paul had buried his past, the spot where I'd dug it up and nearly destroyed everything. The ground was softer now, winter giving way to spring. I stood there, hands in my pockets, and thought about everything that had happened. How close I'd come to losing Isabella. How fear had nearly made me destroy the very thing I was trying to protect. But I also thought about second chances, about forgiveness, about how sometimes the things we bury aren't meant to stay buried. Sometimes they need to be unearthed, examined, and then truly laid to rest. I thought about Martha, about what she'd want for me, for Isabella. And I knew with absolute certainty that she'd be proud, not of me digging up Paul's secrets, but of me learning to trust again, to let go, to welcome someone new into our family. The wedding was in June, small, intimate, just close friends and family. Isabella wore Martha's grandmother's dress, altered to fit. She looked so much like her mother that day that I had to turn away when I first saw her. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, taking my arm. "Yeah, kiddo. Just remembering. She's here, you know. Mom, I can feel her." "Me too." I walked her down the aisle, handed her over to Paul, who looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, like she was everything. "Do you, Paul Michael Hendricks, take Isabella Marie Holloway to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." And then they were married. My daughter and the man who'd chosen her, who she'd chosen back. At the reception, Paul pulled me aside. "I have something for you." He handed me a small box. I opened it to find a key. "What's this?" "Our house." Paul smiled. "We bought a place 20 minutes from here. We want you close, Dad. We want you to be part of our lives, part of our family." The word family broke something open in me. I pulled him into a hug. This young man who'd survived so much, who'd found love despite everything, who'd given me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. "Thank you," I whispered, "for not giving up on me." "You're my family now," he said simply. Family doesn't give up. Later, I watched them dance. Isabella's head on Paul's shoulder, his arms around her, both of them lost in their own world. And I felt it. Peace. Real, genuine peace. Martha had been right. Our past shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. We can bury the pain, not to hide it, but to make room for something new, something better. I thought about that night in December, about seeing Paul dig a hole in my yard, about the fear that had consumed me, about how wrong I'd been. But I also thought about everything that had come after, the conversations, the forgiveness, the slow, careful building of trust. Paul had buried his past to make room for a future, and in a way, I'd done the same. I'd buried my fear, my need to control, my inability to let go. And in that burial, in that letting go, I'd found something I didn't expect. A son, a family, a reason to keep living instead of just existing. Isabella caught my eye from the dance floor and smiled, mouthed the words, "I love you." I smiled back, feeling tears on my cheeks. "Love you too, kiddo." The music played on. People laughed and danced and celebrated. And I stood there, watching my daughter start her new life, knowing that I'd played a part in it, not a perfect part, not even a good part at first, but I'd learned, I'd grown, I'd changed. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not the mistakes we make, but what we do after, how we choose to move forward. I looked out the window at the setting sun, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel Martha's absence like a wound. I felt her presence like a blessing. She'd be happy, I thought. Happy that I'd found my way back to living. Happy that Isabella had found love. Happy that I'd learned to let go. And in that happiness, in that peace, I finally felt free. The past was buried. The future was here. And I was ready for whatever came next.